We are going to start, though, with Paul George's team, with the Philadelphia 76ers, who right now are off to a pretty dreadful start, both on and off the court. On the court, they are 1-5 as we record this. They are 26th in offensive rating in the NBA. They are 21st in defensive rating. So by any metric, they are a bad team. Paul George, we just mentioned, he is just back. Joel Embiid won't be back until next week after he got into a physical altercation with a columnist in the Sixers locker room that resulted in a 3-game suspension from the NBA. So it's a mess right now, Ben. But it is only 6 games into this season. So how concerned are you about what is happening right now in Philadelphia?
Well, when you make an investment in Paul George over the summer, you're spending a lot of money on a guy who's kind of in his mid 30s. The clock is ticking from the day you sign that contract. You want to hit the ground running if you're in that spot because you've got, Joel Embiid kind of smack in the middle of his age prime as well. Now is the time you need to be winning. You don't want to have to make up all this ground because they're already in a big hole, similar to the Milwaukee Bucks to start the season. So I think it's pretty troubling if you're Philadelphia. At the same time, one of the lessons that we're getting, if you want to call this like the hard cap era or the parity era, is with the talent being spread out more evenly around the league, we're really feeling the impact of star players almost like never before. Like when Jokic comes off the court for the Nuggets, they're hopeless, right? I mean, Giannis is trying his best. He doesn't fit great with Dame in Milwaukee, but as soon as he gets off the court, the Bucks bench is terrible, right? And so I think if you're a Sixers fan, you could say, well, look, maybe our bench guys aren't the best. It's not a huge surprise we're struggling without Embiid. But when he does come back and play, we're going to feel that superstar impact just like we have in previous years. So I don't think it's to the point where if you're a Sixers fan, you're panicking and you're saying, oh, God, how are we going to fight our way back up the standings? We saw them do that last year and make it competitive after Embiid missed a couple months in their first round series against the Knicks. So it's not like all bets are off. This is terrible, but it's a rough start. And I think the suspension deal in terms of him shoving the reporter, it's just emblematic of the frustration around that group, right? Like, if this isn't going how we thought it was going to go.
Yeah, I'm not ready to panic just yet about Philadelphia, though I do think that there needs to be a priority made to getting these guys on the court for as many games as possible. Because, and you know this, talent can only get you so far. You have to have chemistry that comes along with that talent. Look at the Suns as a recent example. A lot of things went wrong in Phoenix last year, but among them was that Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal only played about 40 games together. You've got to play more. You've got to develop chemistry. You can't just microwave it at the end of the season. The best teams, historically, especially more recently, whether it's the Warriors, the Nuggets, the Celtics, are teams that have been together, the core of which have been together for a number of years. So you have to prioritize getting all these guys out there on the floor. I'm not just talking about having Embiid, George, and Maxey. You remember, you think the rotation from last year's team, really, who's back? Embiid, Maxey, like Kelly Oubre? Like, that's basically it from the rotation from last year. These guys got to find some chemistry together on both ends. They've got to figure out how to play together on both ends. So that to me is a looming concern. I did think you saw some of that chemistry stuff crop up in that game against Phoenix. Like, I get that Paul George is
whose turn is it, right?
Exactly. Like, I get that Paul George is a quote-unquote superstar. But the idea that Paul George, who had 15 points in the fourth quarter of that game, should have been the guy and not Tyrese Maxey, who had like 30-something in that game, to take that final shot is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Like, these are the things you have to learn as a team. And the Sixers, over the next few months, have to make sure that, we're going to let Embiid sit out back-to-backs, and maybe we're going to do the same thing with Paul George. But there can't be a week, or every week can't be we play these guys 2 out every 4 games. Because if you do that, you probably ensure that you get into the playoffs healthier than you were a year ago. But you're going to wind up going through growing pains in the postseason against teams like the Celtics, against teams like the Knicks, teams that have real chemistry that I don't think the Sixers will be able to overcome.
With you completely. Look at what's winning right now around the league, right? It's the continuity and it's stability. Those are two factors that the Sixers just don't have. I could point to Boston. I could point to Oklahoma City, who's got a case as the best team in the league right now. I could point to the Cleveland
Cleveland.
Cavaliers.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's their whole deal, right? Like all those cores have been together. Another team that's interesting, you mentioned them, the Suns. The Suns look better the second time around because
Yeah.
shockingly, they've had their guys together. They built up a little bit of a game plan. I think Bud's made some smart tweaks down there, and they're kind of off and rolling much better than they were to start last
I think
season.
a point guard helps too, Ben. Like,
Yeah.
I think having a real point guard. Tyus Jones has kind of been the same guy we saw in Memphis and Washington. Like, he's picked up right where he left off in those spots.
Well, they got the rookie Ryan Dunn, who's playing the perimeter
Yeah.
defense they didn't really have last year. I think having Plumlee when Nurkic isn't playing well is helpful. Like they made some nice moves around the edges to kind of fill things out, but they also learned about their mistakes in last year's playoffs when they got exposed, right? And so Philly is just starting that process. I mean, they don't have the benefit of seeing what's going to work with this core, what's not going to work with this core, like when it's really money time. So I'll be honest, like, Embiid can come back and get them back into the playoff picture. I do not buy the 76ers approach. I do not buy their plan. I don't think that it's going to be a big change from Paul George that we saw with the Clippers, where there was a lot of playoff shortcomings and frustrations. Somehow that's going to change overnight once he goes to Philadelphia. I just don't buy it. I like Tyrese Maxey as a player, but he's now juggling, like you're saying, between what's his shot versus when does he have to defer to guys who are older than him, more experienced than him, more decorated than him. Like it's not a huge surprise, Paul George gets the ball in that spot, even if it wasn't the right call. I'm not loving the mix. I don't really trust their bench either. I think, to me, they need Embiid back as quickly as possible. Like you said, he needs to get as many minutes, under his belt with Paul George and Maxey together as possible. But even their best case scenario, to me, it's pretty low. And I kind of feel that way about Milwaukee too. I don't want to just pick on Philly. I mean, I look at this Bucks formula; they're down at the bottom of the standings as well. They've had their two stars healthy. They haven't had Middleton. It doesn't really seem like it's working. So I think we're
Yeah.
just getting to a point here with some of these cores where, hey, the ship has sailed. It's a new era.
So what is Underdog? Underdog is the place to play if you're a sports fan looking to win money while watching sports. With over 5 million happy players and $2 billion won, Underdog makes it fun and easy to cash in on all your favorite athlete performances. Compete against other players just by selecting higher or lower on 2 or more player stats, and you could win up to 1,000 times your money. So turn every touchdown into a win with Underdog. Underdog is the best place to cash in on all your takes this football season. Which players are going off, which ones are ice cold. Make your picks in just a few taps and turn your sports opinions into real money. You could win up to 1,000 times your money just by choosing higher or lower on player stats like points, blocks, steals, and much more. I've had a lot of fun using Underdog to go all in on Anthony Davis, who is having a monster season on both ends of the floor. Tyrese Maxey, who has stepped into a huge role in Philadelphia. And the Boston Celtics, who continue to put up win after win. Even the Cleveland Cavaliers, Darius Garland, a 45% three-point shooter. I've had a lot of success and a lot of fun playing with Underdog. So download the app today and use code OPENFLOOR to get up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly. That's OPENFLOOR to get up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly. Select higher or lower on your favorite players and cash in on Underdog. Must be 18 or over, 19 or over in Alabama or Nebraska, 19 plus in Colorado for some games, 21 plus in Massachusetts and Arizona, and present in the state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply, void in Colorado. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org in Arizona, 1-800-NEXT-STEP, 1-800-639-8783, or text NEXT STEP to 53342 in New York. Call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. What has been your takeaway from all the things that have gone on with Embiid this season? From the beginning stuff where he's not participating in training camp, the Sixers aren't saying anything about his injury. Nick Nurse is up there every night like a human piñata. Having to, take hits from Philadelphia media. Hits that I think are justifiable, right? Like, you're not offering any kind of explanation for Embiid's injury. You're not offering any kind of timeline. And then look, I think the whole, what do you tell your fans thing is kind of a straw man at times. I think there is an obligation for the 76ers to reveal exactly what is going on with Joel Embiid. And the NBA agrees with that. That's why they slapped the Sixers with that fine, because he is injured. Like, they established there is an injury there that he's dealing with, but the Sixers don't seem to be inclined to reveal those injuries. Then you fast forwarded to the two incidents recently. One was, the two separate things that happened with Embiid. One was him saying, responding to criticism, saying, I've done a lot for the city. Like, that stuff goes over my head. Like, yeah, great. You've been a fixture in the city. You were also rewarded with like $500 million in contracts. Like, you get paid for it, man. You're not doing this pro bono. Like, that stuff kind of bothers me a little bit, because it's great to be a one-team player. I love that. They're rare and few and far between in today's game, but you're well compensated for being a 76er. But then you have the stuff in the locker room, and look, we can debate the word choice. I think Marcus Hayes, the columnist, even agreed after the fact that he chose the wrong words. That was edited out.
He changed his column.
Changed his story, which rarely happens. Like, he changed his whole story. But for Embiid to react the way he did and shove the reporter like that, you can't go that far either. So what's been your take on kind of Embiid specifically over the first month?
Well, I think it was the right decision by the NBA to suspend Embiid for multiple games. They landed on 3 games. That felt fair given this situation, because you just can't have physical confrontations either way between reporters and players. That's just unacceptable, right? Now, in terms of what initially caused that dispute, you're dead on. Is the lack of transparency about his health, right? I mean, that is the what kind of germinated this entire thing, is the frustration that builds up and builds up. I don't think that column even gets written in its original form if they're not just sitting there in a black hole of information saying, where is the franchise center? Why did he play in Paris? And then he's not playing at all in the preseason, and he's not playing the first week or two of the season. I mean, I just think it's unacceptable from a fan base standpoint, from a business standpoint, to have such a key figure of the league just be kind of blacked out with no information. Look, we see the same thing here in Los Angeles with Kawhi Leonard, and it's gotten to the point with Kawhi where it's been so many years of this, it's like people almost don't even ask anymore, because it's like, okay, well, you just kind of give up at some point. So I give the Philadelphia media credit for sticking on this topic and to try to get answers. And I think that the 76ers have to approach it better. I think the league needs to think a little bit harder about this too, because they fined the 76ers $100,000. Is that going to change their approach to any of this? I mean, you just kind of write that off, And I think with Embiid, a 3-game suspension, that's pretty stiff. I mean, that cost him $1 million in salary. Hopefully that will be enough to prevent any sort of a further incidents, between these two people. But I can promise you this. There's going to be more critical columns going towards Embiid about how he plays, whether he steps up in the clutch. Is he capable of staying on the court? Has he been professional with his conditioning? Like, those issues have dogged him for years and years and years. They're not going away. And I think the onus is on an Embiid and the 76ers to figure out better, healthier ways to handle that criticism.
Yeah, I do like that the Philadelphia media stuck on it, and didn't just kind of let some of these vague statements kind of go by. And I would actually encourage more of that from Clippers media, if we're being honest, right? Like, anyone that sat in on that Lawrence Frank press conference in September and heard the word choice by Lawrence, who I like a lot, but heard the word choice by Lawrence saying like, oh, he's trending in the right direction. We're getting him ready for as full a season we can get. Like, give me a break. He was hurt in May. He was hurt in July. And he's still hurt now. There's no return in sight. Nobody's talking about it. Like, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy that this is kind of just being viewed as, all right, well, Kawhi's out. We'll see what happens. Like, Clippers season is slipping slowly away while this guy sits on the bench. Meanwhile, Oklahoma City sits out there and says, great, Cooper Flag is going to be in the mix for us next year, and we take away your draft pick. So
yeah,
crazy.
Well, they are paying the price in one way, Chris, and I would say that the attendance at the new Intuit Dome, which is a spectacular new facility, right, has not been as strong as you would expect. There's been a lot of empty seats for a brand new building in this opening month, and obviously they lose Paul George. That's a big hit. They lose Russell Westbrook, who was actually pretty popular in Los Angeles because he's from LA. So they lose him. They don't have that draw. James Harden's been trying to carry the weight, but it's a lot of turnovers late. It's a lot of missed free throws late. The burden has been catching up to him. I think not having Kawhi Leonard and having that cloud over him, I think people are voting with the dollars because in a lot of cases at these games, there's been just significant amounts of empty seats. And you would think after hyping up this building for years and unveiling it in a big way, a lot of national TV games they've already had so far, you would expect there to be larger crowds, and there just hasn't.
Oh, they're also, did I see somewhere they're charging like $70 for people
They are.
to park? Like,
Yeah.
that's crazy.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, man. Like, this is a conversation for another day, but like, the NBA is pricing its fans out. It
Yeah.
really is. With a family of four unable to take, two kids, husband and wife to a game for less than like $3,000 if you want to get decent
Yeah.
seats. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. It's like a vacation to go to a game each time. When I saw that $70 thing, I was just like, wow. And
Yeah.
I've seen it bad. Like right now
Yeah.
in Boston, $65 to park
Yeah.
at TD Garden. It's nuts. It's absolutely nuts. And this is a problem for the NBA.
I was just going to say that Boston to me is like one of the most expensive markets I have to travel to during the playoffs, and I think it's more in for a Clippers game parking than it was during the finals in Boston, right? So it's like, come
Absolutely
on,
crazy.